to Creativity Unleashed, a podcast about getting out of your head to start living in the flow, and a program that will speed up your journey from underdog to hero to champion. So I'm really excited to have Joseph Nguyen. Is that correct pronunciation?
Nguyen.
Nguyen. Okay. And he is an author of 3 books, in addition to creating this brand new course, which is exactly what we're talking about on this podcast. And the course is called The Art of Creating. And in his first book, Don't Believe Everything That You Think, it's a #1 international best-selling book and translated into more than 30 languages, over 30 languages. So welcome, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you. I met Joseph through my Akron 3 Principles group, and we were introduced to him, and he shared his story with us, and it's just such an amazing journey. So Joseph, would you want to tell us a little bit about what life was like for you before the 3 Principles?
Not great. Well, I would just say, to summarize very succinctly, full of psychological and emotional suffering, pretty much on a daily basis. So for I would say for most of my life, it was quite, I would say, mundane or just not exciting. It felt unfulfilling, and I wasn't sure why. This was something that plagued me for most of my life, actually, especially when I went into college and tried to do something with my life. So the pursuit of purpose and fulfillment was always top of mind for me. And it's interesting because it seemed like the more that I tried to do that, the more suffering I experienced, because, and I tried a bunch of different things, right? Like people were saying, set goals for yourself, achieve things, start a business. I did all those things, and then it wasn't really working. I was like, I just wanted to make a good living and to be able to help my parents pay back their debt. And they were actually $1 million in debt, and to help other people just not suffer as much. But for some reason, I couldn't do that for myself, which was very interesting. So that quite plagued me and haunted me every single day. And I thought all I need to do was just make bigger goals. So I was like, oh, instead of trying to help a few dozen people with my agency, maybe I should just set a goal of, let's just try to help 1 billion people become happier or more peaceful, or be able to just experience peace. When I set that goal, it just completely froze me because I never thought it would be possible. So then that just completely had an adverse effect, the exact opposite of what I wanted. So I didn't really know what to do. And I essentially started my agency, built it up for about 4 or something years, and was somewhat successful at it. I made quite a bit of money, and I definitely hit a lot of my goals that I set out to do. And after those 4 years, I just hit a point where I wasn't enjoying it as much. In the beginning, I was, but then I just stopped liking it or loving it. And I even got to the point where I was able to help pay off a lot of my parents' debt, and they're going to be able to pay off that debt within the next couple of years, probably less than that, which is amazing because I did the math when I was probably about 16 or something, and I knew that they were not going to pay it off by the time they were going to leave this earth. And so I had to do something, and that's why I started my business. And so even after all that time helping them pay off their debt, then having probably 50 plus clients around that time, and then I made a lot of clients a lot of money. And my goal was, if my clients are happy, if I'm making them a lot of money, then they're happy and I'm going to be happy. And it's just going to be heaven on earth. That did not happen, even though I've made clients literally millions of dollars. I think one client alone made over 20 from the marketing that I helped them do. But I felt nothing from that, absolutely nothing. If anything, all they were doing was to optimize for the money, and they didn't really want to do anything else with it. So it just felt like I kept going back into these holes where I felt purposeless, unfulfilled, didn't really enjoy what I was doing anymore, and didn't know why. And at the time, I had a business partner, and things were going not great in the agency. We were losing clients quite a bit, and we actually lost 80% of our client base. And that
Wow.
was about a year and a half ago, or about 2 years ago. And so things were going south, and I didn't really want to do anything about it because I didn't enjoy it anymore. And it was at that time that my business partner actually left as well from the business. And then I was probably in about 40 to 50 grand worth of debt. So that was not fun. On top of that, I had about 2 contractors, both of which left. And my main one, who was taking care of all the clients, that all got dumped onto me. And so I had nobody left and all these clients to fulfill with that much debt. And I didn't know what to do. And it was at that point that I really hit rock bottom. We're talking fetal position on the bed, on the floor, wherever. And not, it just really felt like I had no options left. And it was at that point where I asked myself a very important question, which is also in the book, which is, I feel like I have nothing left to lose. And so let's just run this thought experiment. And I just asked myself, if I had unlimited money, already traveled the world, had no fear, and didn't receive any recognition for what I did, what would I do, or what would I create? Most of the time when you ask yourself that question, like I did, nothing comes up for a little bit, especially if the mind is racing quite a bit. But after that starts to settle down and there's silence, something comes up. And in that silence, in that space that I created for myself, 3 things came up, which is speaking, writing, and then coaching. And that day, I began to shift everything towards those things, because that to me is what made me feel alive. Just even thinking about those things and then doing them was a whole different story as well. So it was an overnight shift, but I gradually started to change the trajectory that I was going with my life, because my whole entire life I was going down this path and doing everything to accomplish external success. But I did nothing in terms of trying to create my own inner happiness. Those two are usually direct opposites. Having external success in the world and then doing something that actually brings you joy and peace in your life. So I didn't know if I was going to make money from coaching or speaking or writing. I've actually never really done any of those things other than some pro bono coaching on the side for some friends, which I don't really count. And talking to my mom a lot, I feel like I coach her a lot, but that doesn't really count. So I had no idea, no plan, no nothing, but I just moved. And it's crazy because once you commit to something like that and choosing yourself and your own peace and your own joy, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the odds are, even if everything is against you, the universe starts to help you or conspire for you, and things move around to create that path that you're now treading. So as I began going down that path, I looked up a random course. Because I've coached a lot in the past, just I thought I was a really good listener, but I never really took a course on coaching, even though I wanted to do it, which was very interesting because I try to learn everything I possibly can about everything I'm interested in, but never coaching. And so what's also interesting about that is I never looked up a course on coaching because I thought I was natural at it. So I was like, oh, I don't need that. But that's exactly how you know something is a gift for you, that you don't feel like you have to learn it as much, or that it comes so naturally, or that you don't even think you have a gift or a skill because it is so natural to you. It hides right under your nose. So that to me was coaching. And so I looked up a course and then found this random one from Michael Neal, and he taught the 3 principles. And that's why I first discovered the 3 principles and began utilizing it essentially. And then I went into like the 𝗕𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃, started listening to a lot of different videos within that whole community and website, and consumed everything I could about that. And that was when things started to change for me, because I started to realize that I didn't have to believe everything that I was thinking, that I could separate myself from whatever's going on in the mind. And that if I don't necessarily give it energy and I just allow myself to not need to think about all the stuff that's in my mind, I can find peace. So that's really how I got there. And it was so random, but that's usually how it works. You can't really predict when you'll have that pivotal moment of change or that rock bottom. But usually the greatest shifts in our life come from that rock bottom moment where you feel like you're completely lost, that you have no options left, that you feel like you want to give up. And it's actually us giving up our own egos, our own thinking, or our old way of life is when we find ourselves again in what we actually want in life versus trying to uphold an image that we thought we needed to because of how we've been raised and our conditioning. So that was up to that point. And a little bit after that was when I started writing the book. Out of nowhere, that's when probably about a month after that course, I just felt this urge to write things down. I've never really written before. I never even really kept a journal for longer than a few days. I tried a lot, but I've never really written other than a few articles for fun and put it up on Medium. But I just followed this urge and this calling to write some of it down. And that was when I started writing the book. And I had no plans for it, again, in the same way. No plans for it, didn't know why I was writing it, didn't know if I was going to make money from it or not. That didn't really matter to me. I just wanted to write so that I could remember what happened because it was such a drastic change in my life. And it was at that point where almost every single day I was just filled with anxiety up until that point, constantly worrying about business, about clients, about results, about all that stuff. But after that shift, it was pretty minimal after that. Of course, there would be times where I slip back into thinking and overthinking and anxiety and all those things. But once I catch it, it's pretty quick that I come back as long as I commit to it and don't fall into the illusion or the seductiveness of trying to overthink our way into fixing things. So that's really the story. And then there's so many more details, but you can kind of let me know where you want to go.
Yeah. So when you started writing the book and when you started getting into it and you started to really be in the flow, and I know in your books you talk about being in the flow and you talk about this place of connectedness. So can you talk about that, the actual process of writing from that place?
Yeah. So the first thing I will say is that there's not much thinking going on while I was writing the book, because if there was, I wouldn't have written it. Keep in mind, I have no credentials, no college degree, no background of psychology of any sort. My family isn't doctors or anything like that. So I have zero credentials in terms of any credibility to write this book. So if I was thinking and just in my head about this, I would say, I have none of that. Why would I write? Who would listen? What's the point of this? I've never written before. Everything is pretty much against me. And I wasn't even doing this prior. I was just running a marketing agency. So what do I know about the mind, psychology? I mean, this problem has plagued humans for the entire existence of our species. So who am I to think that I can tackle this and articulate it in a way that it hasn't been done before? And not only that, but who am I to think that I can do it better than every single other book that's already out there, which is millions of books that are on this topic. So that is why there's no way I could have written it if I was just in my head thinking and listening to those thoughts. So what I did was I didn't listen to any of it at all and ignored it, really. And I followed what I felt. I just followed a feeling. I followed that feeling of peace, love, and joy. I followed what felt to me was my intuition. And to me, intuition is what feels expansive, aligned, and unknown. Those three pillars, I would call them, are the foundation for intuition. And that's really how I make my decisions from now on, or at pretty much every single time. I follow those three things. In terms of following what's expansive, that to me is what makes me feel alive, come alive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not scary. So that's why the word expansive is very intentional in the way that I use it. It's not what makes me happy, because what makes you happy sometimes is avoiding that fear.
Yeah.
So following what feels expansive is critical. And that can mean bungee jumping or going to give a talk or trying something new, even though it could be a little frightening. And the next one is aligned. It has to be aligned with you, because although it can be expansive, let's say jumping or skydiving, right? That could feel expansive, but is it aligned with you is a different question. Because I'm not just going to go, if it was just expansive only, and that was the only criteria for following intuition, that would mean I would just go and chase adrenaline, which isn't necessarily what is aligned with us. So it has to be expansive and aligned. And lastly is unknown. And this is where the fear comes in, because if we keep following what's familiar, we're going to always get what we've always gotten. So that unknown piece is what brings in serendipity, what brings in space, what brings in new possibility. Without going into the unknown, there's no way for anything new to come into our lives. So that's why I follow those three things. And that's what your intuition is. That to me was the foundation for the book. So I just made the decision to follow the book because it felt like those three things to me, even though it was against all odds, against everything that everyone was saying, against everything I've always thought. So as I began writing, my whole process was essentially documenting my own journey. So if you look at the chapter outlines and chapter titles, most of them are questions. And those are questions I asked myself as I was learning about the three principles and as I was learning about how I can let go of the thinking that was plaguing me. So that's why it's a very easy read, because it's basically written for me and in the way that I understand it. So it's very methodical, it's very sequential, and it makes sense because each chapter builds on the last. So all I did was just open up with a question whenever I would want to write. And whatever came to me is what I wrote down, with no filter, without any thinking, without questioning it or doubting it or anything like that. And that's why it's so potent in terms of how it's so compelling. To me, I don't feel like it was me who wrote it. It was something beyond me, beyond my own thinking, because I didn't know any of that prior to writing it. If you asked me those topics and those concepts or that philosophy prior to writing it, I couldn't tell you anything. Those things came to me as I was writing it. And it's funny, I think one of my mentors previously told me too, like, life is funny because the moment you begin walking down the road or the path that you're meant to go on, that's when it starts to show up. So that was exactly how I wrote the book. I just started writing, and then the path showed up, and I just kept going.
I love that. I love that so much, because like a big, huge part of what we're talking about here is being in the flow to unlock your purpose. Because when you start to operate from a higher purpose, when you start to like take those steps towards that path, and then the path, like exactly what you just said, then it makes everything make sense.
It really does. It's almost the same way as trusting that whatever you do, you'll be okay. Yeah. That's really what it means to trust your intuition. Not that it's not trusting that you will be amazing at whatever it is, or trusting that you'll create the greatest thing that's ever been invented in the world. That really has no significance in the process of creation. It's really trusting that no matter what you encounter along the path, you can figure it out and that the solution will come. It's not really trusting in anything else. It's just that. Yeah. And so that's what it is to be an artist, a writer, or whatever it is to just do the craft and to trust that whatever you need to know in that moment to create the next stroke, the next word, that will show up. It's almost like driving somewhere new in a new city that you've never been to and just punching in the GPS, knowing that the GPS will take you to wherever you want to go, but you don't really have a say in terms of the path that you'll get there. You don't really know, especially because you don't know the area. But if you know that all you need to do is create and you commit yourself to that, like the path will reveal itself. So you start driving and then the GPS will tell you turn here and then turn here and then turn here. And probably 100 turns later, 100 strokes later, 100 words later, or 100 pages later, you would have written a book. You would have gotten to your destination. And that's really the process, is that the next turn will only reveal itself, right? In the GPS, it doesn't outline every single turn on the page as you're driving. I mean, you can click that setting and see it, but no one drives like that. Everyone only drives with the GPS on, and it only shows you the next turn. That's
Yeah.
all you need. You only need to know the next step. You don't need to know the whole entire journey. And we won't ever. But if we're constantly saying to ourselves that we have to know everything before we start, or that everything has to be perfect before we begin, then we're never going to take that first step. And that's why the next step isn't revealed. But if you
Yeah.
keep trusting and taking that next step, then the next one will be revealed.
I don't know. I mean, I think I know I'm supposed to be here doing this right now. And I think you know you're supposed to be here doing this right now. So there's that, at least that sense that this feels right.
Oh
This,
yeah. And that's where the
there's
alignment
this,
piece comes in.
yeah, yeah. Um, so how do you feel now? Like, do you ever get depressed or anxious now? Or what's life like now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say 80 to 90, I'd probably say closer to 90% of the day is just peaceful, where there's not really worrying going on or anxiety or depression or anything like that. But there will be times where something happens, let's say, because my fiance, she has a chronic illness. So let's say we have to go to the hospital, or she has a feeding tube. So we might have to get her feeding tube changed, or something happens, or she gets sick. Those things can be very hard for me personally. Um, and it's gotten a lot better over time. But what I've noticed is maybe I'll be upset or frustrated or angry or sad for maybe probably a few hours tops. Even that's a little bit long nowadays. But after that, then I go right back to just calm and serenity. And that's just working in real time in terms of understanding that all of the emotional suffering is coming from my thinking. So to me, I almost can, it's essentially as soon as I catch it, I can come back.
Yeah.
But sometimes I understand that my body needs to process these things. And so I'm okay with just sitting in whatever, let's say, physiological reaction is going through. And I'm there with it. But I don't think about it. There's not really a dialogue or commentary about whatever my body is experiencing. It's more of just observing and understanding that this is what's going through it. But I'm not saying this is the worst thing ever. Like, why is this happening to me? This is terrible. Like, it should have gone this way, or that's really unnecessary. And that only exacerbates whatever the feeling is and prolongs it. But without that commentary of the emotions we're having, the emotions cycle through pretty quickly. I think neuroscience says it takes about 90 seconds for an emotion to be processed through our body. And if it's prolonged after that, that's only due to our own thinking that restarts the cycle again, the more that we think about it. And it's just reinforcing that specific neural pathway. But
Yeah.
without thinking, that pathway is cut off and you don't have to go down that path anymore. And so then you move on.
Yeah, I find I just distract myself and I'm like, what is that? Ooh, and then go look for they like Sid and Michael Neal tell us, just look for the next thought, and it's going to be good and just let it go, So I live in that world too. And yeah, you do find you're low, sometimes you're low, but you're like, oh, what is that? Oh, I must be tired or something, or, it's your body
Yeah.
telling you something, but it's not, but it's, everything's, when you start to live from here, everything seems to unfold in front of you, and it kind of blows your mind, doesn't it? Like,
It's like watching a movie instead of
yeah,
being in it and being freaked out about it.
yeah, but the things that happen to you, like how it unfolds, it's like it's unbelievable. To me, it is, like the connections, the way things happen. It's truly like amazing for me. So, how how has the new you affected all the people around you?
I always say nobody is the same around me, which is funny because in the beginning, I did try to change everybody, like everybody does as soon as
Yeah,
they discover something
sure.
great, or uh, that didn't work out well. So if you're experiencing something great from your life, from what you learned or what you experienced, um, you can try to tell everybody about it and to try to get them to hop on the train with you, but it only just causes so much friction,
Yeah,
especially if the other person doesn't want to or doesn't
yeah,
care for it. Or so I stopped that pretty quickly in terms of trying to make other people become more peaceful or become more conscious or whatever you want to call it. So I really let that let that sit and just pass. And I just focused on myself
yeah,
and began taking care of myself more. And what I noticed was that the more peaceful I was, the more other people were peaceful around me. And they commented on this specific aura and energy, which is funny because I stopped trying. And once I stopped trying, that's when the effect started to happen with whoever I was around. It's really impossible. Like people really underestimate the power of their presence and energy
yeah,
around others, but that's really what affects others most. And I think there's so many things that kind of prove this or show evidence of this,
sure.
but we really communicate so much through our own energy and our own intention, much more than the words. And this is a classic example of it. It's of in a relationship. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah,
And the how we say something is something as simple as "How are you?" could be like a "Hey, how are you?" is different than a "How are you?"
yeah,
And that alone changes everything. And so it's not even the words sometimes, it's our being, it's our presence, it's our energy. And that's what I noticed the biggest change was when I focused on that. And to me, the best example or metaphor I can bring is a rising tide lifts all ships. And so within us, I mean, we're all connected, but if I focus on bringing more peace, love, and joy within my life, I'm connected to everybody else in this sea of consciousness. And so I become the rising tide that lifts all the other ships on this sea of consciousness that we're on.
yeah,
So that's what I experienced from my own life. And I didn't really have to tell anybody to be or act different or to study this or that. Just by me being me alone, that set the example, that set the tone, and that changed their way of being as well to complement whatever I was experiencing. And I wouldn't necessarily conform to whatever other people were doing. And so they would almost morph around me because I wouldn't accept whatever
yeah,
blame or criticism or anything
yeah,
like that onto myself. So I essentially became a reflection for them,
yeah.
and
So
that's what it is.
what I found is when I'm in this place, like when I try to operate from this place and not from my head, that I'm actually that whole part of me, that authentic true self, is connecting with their authentic true self. And the more I find I connect with them there, that it just is, everything else disappears. The things that bother you, it all disappears, and you're just connected. But I don't know if they're aware of it. I know I am. I don't know if the other people around me are aware of it though.
Yeah. They don't need to be
Yeah.
aware of it, but they can always feel it.
They can feel it. Yeah. They can feel that depth. It's deeper and it's richer and it's not superficial in any way. So yeah, I
Mm.
feel that connection with you today. So
Yes, likewise.
yeah, it's really good. So okay, look at my questions, because I know I have so many questions for you. So tell me about the other books. So the first book came out, and how did that roll out? And then how did you move into the other books?
So the first book was about a year ago now. I think it was March 28th, 2022. And once I released that, I didn't really write. I mean, I was writing pretty much daily, but I wasn't planning on writing another book. I didn't know if I was going to write another book or what was going to happen. But I just kept writing daily and sharing things online. And I think about 6 to 8 months later, I looked back at what I wrote and I just flipped through my posts and my tweets and things like that. And I realized that I had over 200 to 300 pieces
Wow.
of short poems that I had written I didn't know though at the time that that's what I was doing, but that's what happened maybe September, October. And then I started compiling and saying, oh, I could turn this into a book. Why wouldn't I do that? And so that's when the second book started to come into fruition. And that was pretty quick. Probably within a few weeks, I compiled it, edited it, and then published it within the next month or so. So that really was how the whole second book came together without me having to think about it, worry about it. I just followed what felt expansive, unknown, and aligned, which is just writing daily. And I looked back that many months later and it was there. So
Awesome.
that was the second book. And it's more of a poetry book. And I condensed everything that I knew from the first book into as short of a phrase as possible. And so it's been interesting to see how people have reacted to that.
Yeah, but it's kind of like Sid Banks, you know, he did the same thing. If you read his books, The Missing Link and everything, it's very
Very short.
short metaphors. It's the way it is. Okay, so tell us about the third book.
The third book, that one is actually a workbook. So I did write in it as well. And I summarized the entire book as well as, I would say, embellished and elaborated on other topics. But it became a very practical step-by-step workbook where you could fill out worksheets in it and essentially go through the process of, I would say, deconstructing your own thinking and seeing how much suffering it causes you.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it a lot. There's a daily journal in there so that you can check in with yourself to see, were you following intuition or were you following your own thinking and anxiety? And it shows you the correlations between the two. And there's something that grades it and says, well, where you rate your level of joy, peace, happiness, and then rate how much anxiety you had or worrying you had, and then look at how much thinking you were doing that day versus not. And so it's a very methodical way of going about it for those left brain people who love
Yeah.
numbers. But
Yeah.
then it also works for the right brain people or people who just don't really necessarily track those things. But it's really cool to see the correlation between the two. And then there's other practical examples or exercises in there where you're going and deconstructing your environment, seeing what is making you more prone to think and what doesn't, and what helps you essentially enter a state of non-thinking and versus not. So these things are really cool. And it's really working with the world versus against it, and our bodies especially. So there's kind of I guess, a school of thought where they say, like, our human bodies are very limited, our minds are very limited, and we are just creatures and beings and animals as well. And so we're going to follow the path of least resistance. And there's not too much we can do about when we're plopped in somewhere. We're going to react a very certain way. It's almost predictable in terms of our own personality, conditioning, all of that. And so with that school of thought, it seems like things are hopeless and that we just are a victim of our environment. But what people kind of miss is that we can actually control our environments. And that's why humans have been able to evolve so quickly, is because we can master our environment and then make it more conducive to non-thinking, not having to worry so much and things like that. So yes, we are very, very, I would say, swayed and affected by our environment, but at the same time, we can always change it. And that's what it means to be the creator of your life versus just a victim of it. So that part is in the workbook as well. And they walk through all of that. So it'll walk through, what's your physical space like? Is it conducive to non-thinking, or is it causing you to think a lot or be really anxious? For example, if we're just surrounded by TVs, technology, phones, if on our social apps or on our phones, we have all the notifications on, obviously we're going to be pretty prone to constantly thinking, the external world, all of that. So it's doing a really good audit of a physical environment, our digital environment, our phones. What is that doing? Checking all of the apps, what is happening, paying attention to when we become anxious, and then also auditing our own minds. Like, what are we allowing in? So what are the inputs? Let's say, what media are we watching? What are we consuming? Not just food too, but those types of things. So all of that is really important. So just watching the inputs, and that's really the whole entire workbook. And I love that thing so much because it just breaks it down into the most specific details as possible.
Yeah, it's really cool because you're extending your coaching your coaching is reaching everybody. And the big part of this journey is to become the observer and the omnibudsman of your thoughts, like, hey, that's a good thought, that's a bad thought. And how are you creating a reality? So I love it. I think that's awesome. So tell us about the course.
The original one that I have out right now is called The Art of Creating. And this focuses specifically on any creative act. I speak more specifically to writing, but it can also work for any art like painting or any sort of creative expression. You can use this course and this methodology to create what you want in the world. I made this mainly because people ask me so much about what's my writing process, how do I do it, how am I able to write these things, and they wanted to model after it. So it dives into my process of what I do. It's very, very simple. And it's actually a text-based course, so most people can finish it in about an hour or so, going through it. But there's a lot of exercises, worksheets, and all of that. So it's minimizing the time spent consuming so that you can maximize your time creating. And since it's text-based, it's very referenceable, so that if you have any questions, you can just go right to the specific chapter or outline, and then it'll answer your question right then and there. And that was probably one of the most fun things to put together, because I haven't really found a course or a book like it where it almost talks about the more esoteric or spiritual, if you will, principles and philosophy and concepts about creating. Because most people, there's courses on writing, right? Or painting, and this is how you actually do the brushstroke. But very few people talk about bringing your own full authentic self into your art. How do you bring that into it so that you can make yourself feel something or someone else feel something? At the end of the day, art is so subjective. So how can you say something's bad or good objectively? You can't. All art is in the eye of the beholder. It's all a perception. So what is it? How can we say that something's good or bad? So for me, I kind of throw that notion of good or bad out the window. And I encourage people to not judge their work based on if it's good or bad, but if it's true to them or not. Because if it's true to them, it's good. And if it's not true to them and they're making something out of alignment with them, that's when they need to change it and make it more authentic. And that's what the best artwork does, is if you go into a museum or anything like that, why do you stop at a specific piece? Why do we buy it? Why, like, what do you like about this versus the other? And all art boils down to, and almost like any decision in life that we make, it all comes down to, does it make us feel something? Yeah. And the way that we make someone feel something from our art is by knowing or examining or experiencing what we're feeling at the time. Every single piece of art or writing that has ever been created, it's essentially a piece or a reflection of whatever emotion the artist or writer was experiencing at the time. So the more that you're aware of that, the more emotion you put into your work, that is what makes your own creation great. And so I really focus on that and throw away all of the other techniques and kind of the traditional or conventional methodologies, and really focus on the energetic, esoteric, I guess, more spiritual components of creating.
Yeah, I love that. And, anybody listening to this course, that's what they're going to be drawn to. So, we're going to, at the end, give them how to find all your stuff. So this is a note from our sponsor, me, and my business, Advent Creative. And our featured client this week, they build industrial loading ramps. And so if you're struggling with capacity at your loading dock, and you want to speed up loading and unloading, they have all kinds of innovative ramps that raise and lower faster, and they go from the ground to the dock, or they go from the dock to a truck, and you can just move a lot more freight and with a lot fewer people. So they also offer moving ramps that last 3 times longer than the old traditional fiberglass ramps. So go to 𝗘𝗃𝗀𝗏.com and support our client, who supports us, who supports this mission of bringing these programs to the world and making the world a better place. Thank you. Now, the next course, how are you going to top that? What's the next course going to be?
I have no
Are you
idea.
keeping it under the wraps? So
No, I can talk about it. It's funny because every book that I write, I always tell myself, there's no way I can write something better than this. There's no way I can, what else
yeah,
more is there to talk about? But that's when I kind of throw that thinking out the window and just create. It's
okay.
not my place to think about, am I going to top it? Is it better than like, that doesn't matter.
Oh,
Completely inconsequential.
okay.
And once I do that, I'm able to bring something new, something exciting, something that I never would have thought possible, because it's not based on the past or me trying to create the future from the past. It's in the present, it's in the now. And in that space is the realm of infinite possibilities. So that's really what I try to do every single time I create, is just blank slate. I don't know what's going to happen, but just take the first step and see where it goes. And that's really it for this course. In that first course, The Art of Creating, I really focus on actually creating. So the work, but I didn't talk too much about how to make a living from creating. That's a whole different
Yeah.
component to it. For example, I mean, since you're in marketing,
Oh, yeah.
it's creating a product is very different than marketing the product.
Yeah.
So in the next course, which I believe it's called Productizing Your Passion, that is about marketing your work and bringing it out to the world. To me, though, they're really one and the same if you're doing it correctly. So the product really is a piece of the marketing and vice versa. So in this next course, it's focusing on, well, one, how do you know what to create? And how do you know what product you can create? And so it walks you through step by step on how to do that. And the core of it is combining different interests and passions together with a creative medium and interjecting and fusing your own style and taste in whatever you make. Because when we do that, we create something very original and very true and aligned with us versus something we've already seen or a replica of something else. But nobody is you. Nobody has the same exact interest, the same exact creative medium, and with the exact same style or taste that you have. For example, we make a painting of a dog. That's not that exciting because tons of people have made that already. But that's why you want to combine your own interests. Nobody has the exact same blend of interest that you do. Maybe other people are interested in dogs as well, but maybe they're not interested in dogs and, let's say, mental health. Or there's this one really famous painting of, I think one of the most famous dog paintings is a bunch of dogs sitting together around a poker table playing.
Yeah. Yeah. I know
And
that one. Yeah.
yeah. And that's one of the most famous paintings of
Yeah.
dogs in the world. And the reason why is because it combined multiple interests and passions. It combined dogs, not just dogs, though, that would have been boring,
Yeah.
but dogs playing poker. Probably the artist probably loved pokers or cards. And so they combined those two elements and made it realistic, right? So their creative medium was, or their interests were dogs, cards, or poker. And then their creative medium was painting. And then their style was realistic. But someone else could have made a impressionistic style or a more simple style or just line art style or hyperrealism. And that style changes everything. So if you combine all those elements together, you can create a very unique product that's true to you. And that's how you bring it into the world and make something that is, you can call it original. But really, it's just something that's authentic and aligned with you. And I think that's what is missing a lot nowadays with art, or especially in business. People don't really tend to bring a lot of these principles in the business world. But the more that you can do that, the more emotion you can transfer into the product and people can feel that. And that's why they buy. But that's really the course. And then I teach people how to combine it, test, and then really the core principle is to share something daily online. And that's what will allow them to get discovered and people to find out about their work and then to follow them. And that's when they'll build an audience from it. And over time, 6 months pass if they post every single day and creating the content that they want to consume or that they want to see with a product that they want to see in the world. That's how they're able to make a living and just make it easy for someone to be able to click buy. And that's the formula on how to do that. So it takes maybe anywhere between, I would say, 6 months to 2 years on average to be able to do something like that. Obviously, if you refine your craft and you've already built momentum, probably takes 6 months. But if you're starting from scratch, it'd probably take 2 years. So anywhere on that spectrum, but if you do this daily, I've never seen anyone that's done this that hasn't been able to make a living creating. So that's for me personally. My fiance is already doing this. My brother's doing this. So pretty much
Wow,
it's
that's
been
awesome.
proven with my, friends, family members. And I see it right now in the marketplace, and it's really amazing. I just believe that everyone is born a creator, and this is where everything is going to go. So this is kind of the blueprint for that. And it's something that people don't really talk about too much. They just usually focus on marketing only, or focusing on writing only or painting only, but they don't really combine the two worlds together in a way that's aligned with most people. And they kind of force people to use their tactics. I don't really like that. But I focus on creating content that's aligned with them, that they want to see in the world. That's the core principle, is like creating what you want to see in the world, and treating your content as art. So that's really how they can bring themselves into it, and people will pay attention to it, because it's going to make, for example, if the artist felt something creating that piece of content, the audience will. And with their own product, they'll feel that same way as well. If the artist felt something, their people will feel something like that too. So that's a quick synopsis of the course.
Yeah, that's brilliant. The other part that I talk about in my podcast and how I use this is problem solving. So there is no problem that you face that you can't come up with 50, 100 ideas, and there's one idea in there that's good, and that whole idea flow and old-fashioned brainstorming and not judging. Do you use it in that way too?
Yeah, I think one of the core things in that course I talk about is adopting the mindset of, you won't know how to do most things, but you'll figure it out. And if they have that specific mantra saying, I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. If anyone adopts that, they will be able to overcome anything that's thrown at them. And anyone that's owned a business, I always love asking this question of, what business or what problem in your business haven't you been able to solve? Like, think about every single problem that's ever come up in your business. Which one have you not been able to solve? And if they haven't been able to solve it, they probably wouldn't be in business anymore.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're still in business means that they have been able to solve every single problem that they've encountered. And that's likewise in life. Right now, all of us are still living. So we've been able to at least solve the majority of problems that have popped up in our lives. And so the only reason why we might be stuck or something like that is that we're still just trapped in our own thinking and haven't been able to open ourselves up to maybe some new possibilities or new ideas or new concepts. So that is such a core pillar of being able to go down this field, because you won't know how to do most things, and you won't for a long time. And even when you think you know, there's so much more that you don't know than what you do know. So you'll always be in that specific phase of not knowing. And the more okay you are with uncertainty, with not knowing, that's to the degree that you'll be peaceful and successful in whatever you bring out and create in the world.
Yeah, and it's also a feeling of confidence and being empowered, and that faith that it's all going to work out. It for me, that's what it is. It's like, yeah, this is big. Yeah, this is huge. Yeah, we're going to do stuff we never thought about doing, but it's going to be awesome, and we have to do it. We cannot leave it unexplored. So that's about our time today, and I really appreciate this. So will you tell the audience how to reach you, how to find your books? Where are you? How can they sign up for your courses? So
yeah, pretty simple. You can find everything at my website. So that's www.josephnguen.org. That'll be JOSEPHNGUYEN.org. And you'll find my books there, my course, everything. And then my Instagram is where I mainly post. And that's just at, and then it's Joseph Nguyen, my first and last name. And then you'll be able to find everything there as well.
And are you posting daily, and are you putting everything out in the world? And are you doing art as well as writing and courses?
So I do graphic design, which I never thought I would. So I'm just diving into that realm. I do have some graphics up on Instagram and things like that, which I really loved creating. I design like my website and those types of things, which is really fun too. Um, I like took up a little bit of drawing, but I love graphic design so much, and that's usually where I'm at. And then I'm toying a little bit, not with creating animations personally, but having people create them and then me just coming up with the concept or the voiceover and things like that. So I'm definitely diving more into the artistic realm of things and just exploring whatever piques my curiosity.
Well, that's awesome. And I can't thank you enough. And I'm so pleased that you're my first guest, because everything you're talking about is exactly what I'm telling people, which is it's there, it's right in front of you. You just have to get out of your head and get into the flow, and it will all come out. And I encourage everybody to take your course and read your books. And it's just part of this journey, and it's going to be magnificent for everybody. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so
I,
much too. This was such a blast.
yeah.